Just to give you a perspective, you need 120,000 flowers growing to create 2 pounds or a kilo of dry saffron. That's a lot of space. That's a lot of flowers.
Vertical Farming Podcast, Season 12. Regular listeners to the show, regular viewers of the show, welcome back. I like rolling out the red carpet for you. Thank you so much for everything you do to support the show, whether it's just by listening to this episode or watching this episode or sharing a past episode with a colleague, engaging on our socials, supporting us with what we do at iGrow News and everything else under the agtech media group umbrella. We really do appreciate it. If this is your first time watching, I'm positive you're in the right place. It's the show where I interview fascinating CEOs and founders of the leading vertical farming companies from around the world. I'm your host, Harry Duran, founder of Fullcast, our full-service done-for-you podcast production agency, co-founder of the agtech media group, and podcasting since 2014 with my first show, Podcast Junkies. In case you missed the last episode, we had a great conversation with Mark Oshima. He's the new CEO of Babylon Microfarms, and we had a great conversation about the exciting developments in his world and how they're revolutionizing our connection to food. Mark brings such a wealth of experience from his time as co-founder and CMO at AeroFarms, and he offered valuable insights into the industry's evolution and the challenges of scaling an indoor farming business. So please check that out if you haven't done so already. This week, we have the pleasure of speaking with Michael Oster. He's the CEO of Saffron Tech, and we talk about the fascinating world of vertical farming and the potential for saffron as a high-value crop. His journey from oil and gas to ag is a testament to the power of embracing new challenges and opportunities. We dive into the intricacies of saffron production, and Michael shared valuable insights on scaling up from R&D to commercial operations. We explored the unique challenges of vertical farming, the importance of balancing ambition with realistic expectations, and the potential applications of saffron beyond its use as a spice. Michael's experience in business management and M&A brings a fresh perspective to this space, and he offers viewers a blend of entrepreneurial wisdom and industry-specific knowledge. So please pay attention. Here are 5 great takeaways from this episode I want you to listen out for. Number 1, when evaluating a startup or a new business venture, focus on the potential applications and the market value of the product. For Saffron Tech, the high value and diverse applications of saffron, which are culinary, medicinal, and supplements, provide strong market potential. 2, don't underestimate challenges of scaling up production. Carefully plan each stage of growth and identify and address issues before full-scale commercialization. 3, balance short-term priorities with long-term vision. Saffron Tech is currently focused on commercial plant development while keeping pharmaceutical applications as a future goal. 4, secure offtake agreements early to validate market demand and reduce risk. This goes without saying and is something we've heard many times on this show. 5, build conservative assumptions and contingencies when planning projects, especially for timelines and budgets. Michael goes into this in detail, so make sure you listen out for that. If you're enjoying this episode or a past episode, I have one ask for you. Please click that subscribe button below so we grow the viewership on this channel, and that's how more people find it. I'd really appreciate it. And if you're feeling extra generous, head on over to verticalfarmingpodcast.com/love. Leave us a rating and a review, and I would love to read it out on a future episode. As always, you can visit verticalfarmingpodcast.com to read the full show notes for each episode, which includes all guest links as well. Okay, enjoy this conversation with Michael. So, Michael Oster, CEO of Saffron Tech, thank you so much for joining me on the Vertical Farming Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Israel. It's 8 p.m. here.
8 p.m. and it's noon where I'm at. So I think that's the beauty of post-COVID now. Everyone's used to dealing with remote video recording, and Zoom probably helped make a lot of that possible. So it's not as
100%.
strange as it used to be.
100% between Zoom, Teams, Google Meets. The only struggle we have is which one to choose.
So I like to start these conversations off on a high note. What's the best thing that's happened to you this week?
Best thing that's happened to me this week is that my daughter, so we live in Israel now, but returned to Israel after 22 years in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
So I'm the same time zone. I was on the same time zone you're at. And this week, my daughter, who's studying in UMD, University of Maryland,
Okay.
came to join us for the summer. So
Okay.
that's the best thing that happened to me this week.
How was your time in the States?
Amazing. I was an expat for a oil and gas company
Okay.
that was acquired 23 years ago. Joined them, spent 15 years with them, and another 7 years doing other stuff, mainly real estate, a little bit of energy related projects. But they were some of the 22 best years of my life. And
Anything you miss?
four of my kids were born there. So
Anything you miss from the States?
number one, if you ask my wife, she'll answer differently, but my number one is Amazon Prime. We got real spoiled, and
Yeah,
DFW has a very good logistics center. So the average, I wouldn't say the average time is 6 hours, but
yeah.
good deliveries. That's one thing. And no, we happen to be big cheerleaders of Texas. It's a
Hmm.
Lone Star State. Love the
Yeah,
structure there. Love the people there. It was good. It was a good time, but it was time for us to go back home. Back to
yeah.
Israel.
You were born and raised in Israel?
Born and raised in Israel
Yeah.
to British immigrants. That's where some of my accent
Mm,
comes from.
okay.
In fact, they think I have an American accent, but in their eyes. But no, they immigrated to Israel 60 years ago, and
Wow.
or 59 years ago.
Okay.
I was born in Israel and raised here, and became a lawyer. And one of my clients, this is how we got to Dallas. One of my clients acquired a refining oil and gas company headquartered in Dallas.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how you ended up in farming company. Prior to getting started, what had you been working on prior to starting Saffron Tech?
So I have a small real estate business in the US. Partner and I own some multifamily. We have a little bit of, I have a little bit of an energy consulting arm following my 15 years with an oil and gas company, and a lot of executive type experience. So mainly management, anywhere from M&A activity to CEO of certain companies. That's my history. And about a year, just over a year ago, or maybe, yeah, February of last year, when my wife and I decided that we're going back to Israel but didn't make the move yet, I was restarting my connections in Israel.
Hmm.
And the founder of Saffron Tech happened to be a business colleague and a friend. And he asked me if I would join the board of Saffron Tech, which I did at the time. And then 8 months later, when we were actually here, and given the direction he wants Saffron Tech to go in, which is continue the R&D, but in parallel become a commercially viable company, he asked me if I would consider being CEO, becoming
Mm,
CEO, which I gladly took. So it's my
okay.
first Israeli project.
So talk to me a little bit about when you came on as a board member. Is this a role you've held in the past? I'm always curious
Yeah,
because we're in the process of building one ourselves and how you see that responsibility as a board member, how involved you are when you're a board member based on your past experience, if that's
yeah.
different than this one.
So it's interesting. Board members vary from, and I'm saying sort of like as someone who was an executive in a large public company and we had board members, and
Yeah,
as someone who is a board member on a couple of companies now, board members sort of vary from very, very active. And that's usually sort of the ones that are sort of more involved on the financial aspect of the company or the growth aspects of the company, depending on what type company it is, etc.
yeah,
And assuming they have the prerequisites for it, or, and again, it depends on the size of the company, but generally speaking, when you think what a board member is, they're supposed to strategically drive the company and help the CEO execute the business plan. So
yeah,
if it's creating the business plan, they're helpful in that. And if it's driving the strategy or the execution of the business plan, then obviously helping in that. And then there's always board members that are there because they have extremely good connections, but they are not necessarily active. So,
yeah,
one connection that they do is worth millions for the company, and that's
sure.
great. And then there's, depends on the situation, but there's board members that are not very active. I joined Saffron Tech at a stage where, and we could talk about the company, of course, but I don't know if you have our website or any of that, but I joined Saffron Tech when it was sort of deep in the R&D stage and wanting to go commercial, but afraid to go commercial. So a little bit of guidance there, I think, on my end. And now, again, when I'm here, the help I get from my board is either connections or consulting on sort of the larger transactions we're about to enter into, or fundraising, or whatever the case may be. Obviously, you don't want to make decisions by yourself. It's
Yeah,
irresponsible. As CEO, I'm saying. And B, you want to sort of bounce things off, forget the irresponsible part of it, from a point of view of really a sounding board, a help that you can get. My chairman is helping me now with a potential large commercial transaction that we're about to do in Morocco.
Okay.
These are things that sort of people from the relevant worlds can be helpful. And that's what board's about, in my opinion.
When you first joined as Saffron's board member, was that your first introduction to the world of saffron and controlled environment agriculture, indoor farming?
Correct. 100%.
Okay.
Like I had no clue. And you spoke to me about oil and gas, and even there you speak to me more about the downstream rather than the sort of the exploration, the upstream. You speak
Yeah.
to me about oil and gas, I'm okay. You speak to me
Yeah.
about M&A of any type deal, any type large transactions, public companies, private companies, mergers, acquisitions, stuff like that. Yeah, no problem. You speak to me about
Okay.
real estate over the last 7 years, also no problem. Even that sort
Okay.
of depends. Everything's niches. Agriculture, no. Vertical farming, certainly not. Startup with a vertical farming, no. And
Yeah.
saffron, no idea.
Yeah. So what did you see in those early days when you came on as a board member? How much of it was a learning curve to understand what was happening? Because you had to understand obviously the business model to see if that had viability, but then also understanding the business and the industry itself.
Correct. So it takes time. The more you get fed with data points that you can learn, the better. But at the end of the day, you got to sort of hone in to why you're doing this, or why does the company exist? Why does the company think it's going to do well? And I'll touch the specifics just in context of saffron.
Yeah.
But sort of the first question you ask yourself is, okay, vertical farming, we've had many ventures come and go because they failed, whether on energy cost, whether on market entry, whether a million reasons why. And it took me a while to understand, but and then so what's different about saffron? And sort of so the first thing you find out is that saffron is basically it is the most expensive spice in the world. It's called the red gold. Its price varies from, I don't know, $500 a pound on the very, very cheap end to $40,000 a pound on the very
Wow.
expensive end. So it's a
Wow.
big, and a lot of it depends on quality, origin, time of purchase versus growing in the field, etc. But it is definitely not a commodity in the normal sense of when you talk about things like that. And then, okay, so that's point number one. Point number two is what are the potential applications? So again, and that's a general theme, I think, or something you need to check when you're looking into a startup or looking into a business or looking to acquire a business. So what are the potential applications? So now again, specifically on saffron, everybody knows it as sort of the expensive spice, but some who know a little more have seen the medicinal value of saffron. So
Yeah.
anti, anywhere from antidepressant to anti ADHD to anti-aging in a way to antioxidant if it's applied as a cosmetics. But food supplements has now, in my opinion, in a slow way so far, but has started to erupt. And you go into pretty much any vitamin store or anywhere you can buy food supplements. And now there are many food supplements that are saffron based or saffron extract
Yeah.
based. So it's definitely entered into that world. Our vision is to go one step further, which will take time, clinical trials, FDA, all the nine, when it comes to going into the pure pharma world. In other words, if we can find ourselves 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 6 years from now, replacing, Ritalin or Cipralex or any of those types of medicine that work on the same parts of the brain that help, but without the chemicals in them, more the natural way, then it's a huge win for mankind. So I think, like in everything else, you need a very, very, on the one hand, you need a clear vision and a clear business plan for the next 5 years, which I think we do. But on that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have to have that achievable dream. And then when you have the combination of those things, then suddenly, and I'll go back to the question that you asked me before, suddenly the vertical farming put aside, okay, the vertical farming as a whole and the potential risk rewards there, whether it's cannabis, whether it's green leaves, whether all that, It's a whole different picture when it comes to saffron
Yeah.
because of the potential, because of the high, not high yield from a point of view is, I mean, we spend a lot of money to create 1 kilo or 2 pounds of saffron. Just to give you a perspective, you need 120,000 flowers growing to create 2 pounds or a kilo of dry saffron. That's a lot of space. That's a lot of flowers.
Yeah.
So it has to have that upside. And I believe that in our case, it has that upside. In other words, we're going to be producing, or we are producing on a very small scale right now because we have a pilot plant here in Israel, but we're producing the highest quality of saffron if you compare it to sort of the different bands. And right now, saffron is examined on an ISO basis. That's the testing. And ours is in all categories of the active ingredients. And I won't bore you with the details, but it's crocin, procrocin, saffron. In all those categories, we're producing a higher quality than the ISO one, than the top notch saffron. So and then when it comes to that, then again, using the fundamentals, going back, any type of business, at the end of the day, it's the capex you need to invest, it's the opex, the sustaining of the business, what it means, and all that. That's all very important. And it has to, at the end of the day, give you a good ROI or a good return on your investment. And that happens either if your costs are very low or if your value is very high, product that you're selling is high value. So that's how we approached it. And
Yeah.
that's what I've
Thank you.
learned along the last 6
Yeah. Thanks for that overview. That was extremely helpful.
of
What
course.
what I find interesting also is that you've got this background in M&A, in running businesses, and having a lot of exposure to probably seeing what's worked and what doesn't, seeing failures of businesses. I'm curious from your perspective and your experience, where do you see companies that are similar to Saffron Tech, that are getting started with a product or with an idea? Where do you see that they stumble and they fail and they end up not having to deliver on what their promise is based on your experience?
So I don't think, I mean, I'm not a startup expert by any
Hmm.
means. You've heard that through my resume.
Yeah.
But even in my old world, when you check something in a lab, okay, whatever that is, diamond, and I don't mean check the lab, the quality. I mean, when you test something out, synthetic diamond,
Hmm.
producing a new type of gasoline in our refinery at the time, checking out a new process because we think it gives you more yield. And in our case, when we're producing this on a R&D scale first, so it's basically a lab size little sort of compartment or in controlled environment rooms, going on to a pilot scale like we have, which again is sort of like, I would say it's about 100 of a size of a decent size commercial scale. So
Hmm.
100, that's the pilot. What people fail on, to answer your question, is the scale up. So in other words, if everything
Hmm.
is fine, you assume that scale up is going to be a copy paste, just multiplication. It's wrong on a capex basis. It's wrong on a yield basis. It's wrong on an opex basis. And when I say wrong, by the way, you can be surprised sometimes to the positive, but many times to the negative. And your picking robot is not doing the same job when it comes to the mass. And when it comes to when you put more, using my example again, more plants into the same square footage. Um, so the idea, or to avoid that, you got to take leaps, but you can't take too big of leaps. Therefore, somebody could have said, and somebody can say the opposite of what I'm about to say now. I'll tell you what I mean. Somebody would say, when you're done with R&D, go ahead, just build a commercial plant. Well, I can tell you that's a mistake. Of course, you have to build a pilot. I am saying now, we're raising money now for building our first commercial plant. And somebody else will say, no, you should still forget the R&D side, but somebody else will say, well, when you go to commercial, you should assume a degradation of A, B, and C. And you should assume diseases in your plants that you haven't assumed before. There's always something to be said to taking the leap of faith or not taking the leap of faith. That was a long way of answering your question. When somebody takes that leap of faith without enough basis data, that's when they fail, or when they're
Hmm.
hyper focused on just getting a product out, but without
Right.
understanding the business value of it. I mean, you can create, you can do vertical growing. I'm using lettuce, happens to be something that works in certain places. You can do vertical growing of lettuce, but the end product is not worth enough to be to justify the capex, then it won't work.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the, in a nutshell, where using still ag, but you could do that on anything. That in a nutshell is sort of a fundamental issue that any startup comes into.
It seems like a sense your enthusiasm when you talk about these issues and how you like working through these problems and figuring this stuff out. Has this always been a passion for you, like understanding business and understanding what works, what doesn't, and figuring out and getting in there and rolling up your sleeves and seeing how you can make businesses
Yes.
succeed?
So the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes. I always liked to get dirty where I could in whatever it was I was doing, but it's very different in each type of business that you go into.
Yeah,
So to me now, basically, sorry for these are the types of noises that
that's
don't
okay.
deal with. I'm sorry. I have
Yeah, no
a
worries.
child who doesn't care if I'm on a phone.
That's real
Uh,
life, though.
the what?
That's real life.
That's real life. Oh, it's real. Where were we? Train of thought.
Just your how you come across, like
Sorry.
your basically your passion for this.
Yeah. So I've always had the thrive, the drive to fix issues that come my way.
Hmm.
Okay. But what I think is the most intriguing part for me now is to, yeah, it's very easy to fall in love with something, which I have, fall in love with this concept, with this company, with this technology, with the growth
Hmm.
protocol that we've created, with not becoming too political, but 90% of saffron in the world is produced by Iran. So you can go into geopolitical
Yeah,
aspects, and it's
yeah,
probably the number two after oil, wherever their funds go to, that's from saffron. So,
yeah, yeah.
as an Israeli, I have sort of an interest to fight it. So there's obviously that, but yeah, depending on where you are, the obstacles can be tremendous, and the obstacles could be relatively easy. When you talk about a business like ours, building the first facility, it requires planning, it requires engineering, it requires getting bids on everything that you need, and obviously all that. But it also requires on the other side the ability to do extracts so we can go into the nutraceutical
Hmm.
world, the ability to have an offtake agreement. If you don't have a good offtake agreement for the product that you're producing,
Yeah.
then the financial model that you're building, I mean, there's a term that we use that Excel can take anything. You can put in whatever number you want into an Excel. It will do the calculation. It will give you your IRR and what you need. But at the end of the day, you also need to perform. So we're going through a rigorous process of sort of, not just dreaming, but finding justifications. Now, that doesn't mean you're not betting here. We are
Hmm.
betting. We are
Yeah.
betting that it will work 80% of what we're planning. We're betting that the pricing will be, we think it's very conservative. We're betting on we're betting on off takers. We're betting on the what I told you before about the yield of the flour and the ability to sell it. And so there's a lot of moving parts, and there's things that we're focusing on, like I told you now, which is the commercial plan. There's things that we've put on a little bit of a side burner, which
Hmm.
is what I was telling you about the pharma side. In other words, tissue culture and other stuff,
Mm.
agronomy and chemistry and stuff like that, that we're putting sort of on a slower level right now. And we'll expand it again once we go commercial, because A, our state of mind will be such, B, we'll have the product, the fundamental saffron that will be able to, that will enable us, if you will, to do all these clinical trials and stuff like that. So it's really knowing how to balance between, the real challenges that you have for this step of the game and the potential challenges you'll have later down the road.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, Michael, with your experience, obviously you've had wins and maybe even some losses through your experiences over the years, and obviously you learn from those and learn what not to do and what doesn't work. Without getting into specifics, is there a story that comes to mind from something that maybe didn't turn out the way you planned, but turned out to be a valuable lesson at the end of the day?
Not in the saffron world, but a year and a half ago, my partner and I wanted to do a logistics project in the outskirts of Austin, Texas,
Okay.
and it was a grounds up, and there were too many obstacles. The interest rates
Mm,
were going up. It was not double digits for construction loans, but it was pretty high. The fear of the equity, both ours and our investors, to go into something like that. So we worked hard for 4 months doing feasibility studies, doing analysis, justifying it makes sense. It's good. The
mm,
market is just outside Austin, booming market, Austin, Texas, booming market, makes sense. And we ended up not doing the project. The war in Israel broke out. So
mm.
a big part of us sort of mentally wasn't
Yeah.
focused. We ended up not closing that deal, and it was very disappointing. And hindsight, I do not regret not doing it, and for a different reason. I mean, not for a different reason, but for the fears we had. In other
Yeah.
words, the 6 month delay in the execution of the project could have caused us complete turmoil, doubling the need to inject the equity because the
Mm,
banks today are less patient, or 6 months ago, which would be 6 months late on the project, were less patient. They wouldn't have necessarily extended us more time. I've seen it in my old world, in the multifamily world, on a regular basis, where people took bridge loans at 4.5%, which was low. And then they found themselves, 18 months later needing to do a recap at a much lower valuation. So that was an example. That's the most recent example of something that I was disappointed and hindsight happy that I failed or didn't do.
lesson learned, right? So I figure, or I'm wondering if over the years, we talk about the importance of getting the numbers in the spreadsheet too, but how much of this, as you start to have experience, decades of experience, do you start to develop like an intuition? Because sometimes it's not all black and white, right?
Correct. So I would say that, you know, the number one, first of all, how do you do it? You basically put in sort of downside case protections. Okay. So you create if you have a model that has, I've learned in life that a CapEx project takes, and it depends in what world, right? But generally speaking, if you're getting from your contractor, from your subcontractors, from your developer, from your whatever it is, from the authorities, you're getting an idea of time, you should add 30% to that time. Okay. If you're getting a budget, and if that budget has I don't know, a 10% contingency, you better put another 20. Now, the reason I'm saying that is I'm not saying all projects come in over budget and over time, but a lot of them do. And the ones that don't come in, the ones that come in within budget, within the time frame that you did, you're going to get a better return on, and that's great. So the projects that come in under budget and in the time that you planned and that are producing the same type of income that you planned, you're going to surprise yourself, your investors, and all great.
Yeah.
The problem is that if you add too many safety nets or too many conservative assumptions, you kind of lose the financial feasibility.
Mm,
So it's got to
yeah.
be so to answer your question, the truth is somewhere in the middle. The more the plan is defined, using CapEx as an example, if you're getting an offer which is what's called a plus minus 30, you should assume a plus 30. If you're getting a project that is plus minus 10, you should assume maybe plus 10 or plus 15. It's all in the accuracy of what you're doing. The same
Mm,
applies with using the example I gave before. I'm going to build my first plant of saffron production. I'm going to have offtake agreements for 30%, 50%, as much as I can get before I even erect it. It's almost like any other project. If you can get somebody to buy the product from you or the facility from you or whatever it is that you are selling, or
yeah.
if you're exploring the oil, the more you can get sort of on the buy end to start with, the safer you are to get to your goals.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine over the years you get better at refining that and having, looking at those numbers and having almost like a gut check to understand based on past experiences how much you got to work with those numbers to get to where you want to be.
Correct. I don't think you can get to a zero mistake, but I think
Yeah.
the smarter people and the more experienced people narrow those mistakes and sort of can afford to eliminate the dreams that are not either achievable or very low chance of achievability. Look, we're in a business, using my business, we're in a business that has high risk by design, the
Hmm.
technology, the growth protocol in our case. There's risks inherent in the execution. Okay. The last thing you want to do is add to that with bullish assumptions. So now you're just layering on the failure points. So we try to sort of minimize them in a way that, yeah, we'll have room for some failure and still be very successful.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a very smart approach. So when you decided to move from a board member to CEO, is this something challenge that you like, this leadership role as CEO and all the different hats you have to wear in that position?
Yeah, it was a combination. I'll be very honest. I arrived in Israel. I have my business in the US, but became a little more passive there. So I had some free time on my hand. The founder basically came to me with a challenge of, let's go commercial, which the prior CEO, who was very, very talented in the development of the technology and bringing the protocol to where it is and proving the concept in many ways, that wasn't her passion to go commercial, if you will. Also, we have the potential of going public and other stuff that sort of, again, was a little less appealing to her type of experience and more appealing to mine. So, yeah, I dove in with a lot of ambition, and I'm still here and I'm still ambitious. And I'm even more excited than I was 3 months ago, 2 months ago, and 1 month ago.
How big's the team?
We're small. We're very small on
Okay.
on an inherent team. We're four,
Okay.
including me, the chief agronomist, the engineer, and the ops guy. And we have a CFO, which is part time. So call it CFO controller type
Yeah.
deal. But remember, we're not commercial yet. We're still sort
Mm.
of at the startup phase. We have advisors from the top agricultural institution in Israel called Volcani. We have an advisor from Valencia, Spain. Also on the agronomy slash extract side, we have an engineering firm that is helping us with the detailed design of the plant. So we have, but if you're asking me about our core, it reminds me of the days where I was working with these private equity firms and, private equity that's running a 3, 4, 5 billion dollar assets under management, and they have 6 people. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
we're thin, but we have a lot of good help from the relevant people.
How would you describe your leadership style?
I try to lead by example. In other
Okay.
words, I'll give you an example. So part of being 4 people is that when it comes to planting season, quote unquote, we get some help because it's thousands of these bulbs that you need to plant. But the process, because it's a pilot plant, then the process of the planting is not automated. Although we have sort of together the prototype of how that would be also automated. But somebody's got to plant these bulbs. And last Sunday we did a little batch, and I was there together with the agronomist who also shouldn't be spending all day planting. He should be checking, and
Yeah.
the engineer, and we all did it. So that's sort of one part of leadership, I think. The other part of leadership is finding, questioning
Mm.
processes, questioning, but in a way that is intriguing, not in a way that is depressing. In
Mm.
other words, I'll give you a live example. We use good amount of energy, and for that we use a good amount of LEDs that give the photosynthesis to the flower, but at the same time create some heat. LEDs,
Yeah.
despite what you and I sort of think before this call, LEDs produce heat. Now the percentage is much lower than the old lights that we used to use, and the efficiency, if you will, is higher, but it's still there. And there are ways, there's no doubt in my mind, and we've started testing now with pulsing and stuff like that. There are ways to improve that because at the end of the day, every sort of, you know, 1% reduction in operating expenses is going to increase my bottom line by twice that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the types of, those are the two, again, getting dirty, I think, is also helpful with understanding the business. It creates a feeling of camaraderie between you and your peers and your employees and everybody. And it gives it more of a mission perspective. Not always
Yeah.
the most efficient thing, efficient use of time, but in the long run, I think that's part of it. And then doubting everything. And it's not, I'm not doubting my engineer's knowledge versus mine. I know my engineer knows way more than I do in anything related to electrical, mechanical, etc. But when you come from a managerial perspective, you should, and I believe you do, come with ideas that are out of the box. And as long as it's conveyed in the right way and in the respectful way, then I think that's key for success.
Who do you credit with inspiring your management style? Were there mentors that were important for you coming up?
Yes and no. I mean, I loved my mentors growing up, but some of the stuff, and I'm sure we all experience that in life, some of the stuff you learn is through the negative, is
Yeah.
because you didn't like something about the style that was conveyed to you. So,
Mm,
first of all, I know I'm far from perfect, and I know that
yeah.
my employees will think the same thing about me. And when they become one day whatever they want to become, then they'll say, okay, Mikey did that. Exactly what I'm not going to do. I
Yeah.
think acknowledging that about yourself is also important, by the way, that you're far from knowing everything. But on the flip, but to answer your question, I've had both. I've had mentoring that was perfect and taught me everything I need to know in something. And I've had
Hmm.
mentorship that wasn't perfect, but also taught me, because of that, what I can do a little better.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. What's a tough question you've had to ask yourself recently?
Am I doing the right thing? And I'm not talking about in general for Saffron, for what we're doing. I'm talking
Yeah.
about specific processes. I'm talking about betting on a certain direction when you could go
Mm,
in a different direction, fundraising one way versus another way. Am I doing the right thing? And I think it's
mm,
a healthy question, by the way, as long as you're not
yeah.
asking that in a very demanding way. In other words, it's a process. You got to get help sometimes, talking about mentorship, talking about you got to know how to take advice.
Yeah.
To be only people. Now it's people and ChatGPT, and now So no, a paid version because it's better than
Yeah.
the unpaid version. So I'm saying
Yeah.
there's the knowing to ask the questions. That
Mm,
would be the question I asked, and it
yeah.
was in many ways. And hey, sort of, I think that going through that process and analyzing, and either at the end of that process agreeing with yourself and with your board and with your advisors and with your employees that it is the right direction, or sometimes you agree to disagree with certain people around you.
Yeah.
And if you're the boss, you decide. And if you're not the boss, they decide. And we all,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we all have bosses,
Yeah, that's true.
whether we like it or not, whether it's our shareholders, our wives, our
Yeah.
children, sometimes our employees.
Yeah.
We're not the bosses of everything. And you need to listen to what's going on around you.
I think what I like about that answer is that it always involves you looking at all the moving parts and this idea of asking the right question. Because if you continue to ask questions about something that you're trying to make a tough decision about, I think that's where, so many people fail because they don't ask the proper questions. They don't become good. It's almost like a skill, how to ask the proper questions so you get the right answers.
Correct. And I think we all, doesn't matter who you are, if you're Warren Buffett or if you're Mikey Oster, you still have a lot to learn about how to ask the question. It's funny, I was actually talking today with someone about the Chat GPT. And I think a lot of that world is now investing in prompters. In other words,
Yes,
even the advancement of Chat GPT, it's about how you ask the question, and whether it's
exactly.
chat or any other AI driven, it's how to ask the questions. We're saying we need less and less humans. Well, now the focus is on that. And tomorrow the focus will be on something else. I think at the end of the day, asking the right questions and seeking the right answer is something that is not always the easy thing to do, but very, very important.
Yeah, the minute ChatGPT hit that inflection point, I said, the most important skill humans are going to need to learn is how to talk to robots.
100%. And then down the road, that skill will not be needed anymore because the robot will be smart enough to do what the person is right asking.
Yeah.
15 years ago, I don't remember if it's 15, 20, whatever, the best computer in the world still could not beat Fischer or Kasparov in
Yeah.
chess.
Yeah.
Now I don't know where they stand, but I can assure you they do. And so we evolve, and as we evolve, the AI, or as the AI evolves, we evolve, and we become more efficient. And using the saffron example, we're going to become more and more automated. But at the same time, there's the fundamentals that you need us.
So what is your take on automation? There's obviously we're talking about AI, robotics, especially within, CEA, there's a lot of applications. Some it's overused, some probably bring in the tech a little bit too early. So what's your take on it and how do you make that decision and how to fit it into what your plan is?
I think that at the end of the day, using saffron as an example, sorry, I'm kind of addicted to that. At the end of the day, my number one invention here, not mine, the company's number one invention here is that growth protocol that creates generations of saffron out of using our secret sauce, our secret protocol. It's
Yeah.
creating that generational, cyclical, multi cycles per year, higher quality, etc. That is all true, whether or not I have a 99% true, at least, whether or not I have a robot picking the stigmas, the flower, if you will. And it's true whether or not my trays are fully automated, moving through the irrigation, or the irrigation moves through them. Okay. It's going to work either way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, to answer your question, it needs to be driven, in my eyes, it needs to be driven by economics. If by using a robot, which will cost me X hundreds of thousands to build and perfect and pick, instead of one flower every 4 seconds, it's going to do it every 2 seconds, and it's going to save me 10 employees. And it's
Yeah.
going to, and it's so the ROI on that part of the investment needs to make sense. Now, it's not everything is as scientific as time versus employee costs, because sometimes also the quality of the product that you're creating robotically is higher or lower, depending on the thing, but usually higher than if it's manual. So all these things need to come in. Some of them are pure financial, some of them are process related, some of them later down the road will be quality related. So that was a long-winded way of answering your question. I think that as long as it makes sense, I mean, look, getting to Mars is not an economic question at the moment. Now, whether or not it will be in 20 years or 10 years, or when you build some stuff up there, maybe that's part of the vision. In our business, it has to make sense economically from day one. Did I answer your questions?
Yeah.
So
I totally understand
automation
that. Yeah.
and robotics and AI and the ability of someone to control it remotely. And is it only to oversee and see what's going on and understand the climate control? Or is it to fully control it, including, changing rooms and harvesting and stuff like that? So
Yeah.
we've seen it all in everything, and we don't necessarily think it's important for phase one for some things.
Makes sense. And the speed at which that's getting better is exponentially increasing. I mean, if you just use the chat GPT models like every day, it just feels like there's something new. It's almost hard to keep up. And I imagine that's happening.
Yeah. And to your point, there's always the balance between the amazingness of it and effectiveness of it
Yeah.
and the errors that come with it. So
Yeah.
using your example, you can ask ChatGPT or whatever you can ask him a question today and he will answer you one way, and you'll ask him the same question tomorrow because of the way it's thinking. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that will get better. And the same
Yeah.
applies to using the robot I was talking before, the way it picked my flower. If there's wind in the room, then
Mhm.
yes, it identifies the flower, but by the time it gets to the flower, moves a little bit, it didn't pick the right spot. So that's obviously things that you want to improve. And we
Yeah.
are improving, and it's going to get better as we get commercial, and going to come with obstacles. But the fundamental financial model needs to make sense. And then everything
Yeah.
else is sort of like very good bells and whistles.
That makes sense. So what markets are you targeting right
So
now?
we're targeting anywhere from if I had to sort of put in the A, B, and C, I would
Yeah.
say nutraceutical is our number one market today. going into the vitamin world, the saffron based extracts that go
Yeah.
into, and it already exists. It's based on French and Spanish extracts that are produced. We're going to, we believe we're going to produce better extracts more efficiently, more consistent, and it's going to improve that part and enter into a higher, if you will, higher level or higher market extract world, like I said before, but still thinking short term. From there, the other part that we want to enter into is the cosmetics world. It exists already, the cream, antioxidant, stuff like that. Again,
Yeah.
we're going to be bigger, better, everything that you can think of is what we believe we're going to be. And again, the lab tests that we've done on a small scale prove our point. So we're going to get there. And then obviously, not as a fallback position, but saffron as a spice, again, assuming we have, and we do have, the highest quality saffron, then our spice will be sold to the top chefs and the top restaurants and all that. And that's sort of a game there. And then when you think longer term and you're thinking tissue culture and creating the bio, the equivalent of the cultured meat or the
Mm,
synthetic diamond
yeah.
equivalent, then we believe that hand in hand with our agricultural arm, that arm should expand. And we have started and we're underway with some stuff, but we still have ways to go there. And that will lead also to a better pharma, pure pharma, medicinal value. But that's a couple of years down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting timing because with what's happening with the new administration and how RFK Jr. is going after the FDA and all this food coloring stuff and these additives and just trying to get them removed from our food source, I think there's some interesting opportunities that could be opening up for you as well.
Yeah. I think like everything else, when there's new administration, they start. I mean, depends on the president, but
Yeah,
in this case, starts with a very, very high pitch. I think there'll be a medium where sort of it balances its way out, including with everything that relates to the FDA, including well, the example you were giving, food additives, color additives, and stuff like that. So I think, like with everything, it's going to balance itself out. We're going to play with the game the way it is. We're not going to change as strong as I want to believe that I am. I'm not going to change administration decision, but we're obviously going to flow with it. And that's why our targets from FDA perspective are very low right now. In other words, that's why we're entering into again, the food supplement world and not the medicine world. And that's sort of the approach we're taking. And we'll slowly, as we prove ourselves and become what I believe is the pioneer in that sphere as it relates to saffron, we're going to aim higher.
that's a great approach. So, being relatively new to the CEA space, I imagine you haven't been to many conferences or met a lot of other folks within CEA yet, or are you starting to branch out?
So yes, you're right. I haven't been to many. I have spent over the last 3 months. I've been to 10 different, 10, maybe a little more, a little less, different
Okay.
facilities of uh, s- different CEA facilities.
Yeah.
Some of greater similarity to what you do of what we do from a point of view of, what the plant needs from a lighting perspective and the different spectrums, and some in complete darkness because they don't need it. But the idea, and some of them are robotic, where the robot goes through and goes to the different spaces that the plants are sitting. And
Yeah.
some are more like us, where the plants are not just sitting, they go on a rolling robotic machine. So I've been to enough to uh, create the questions that I have and answer some of them already. And my engineer and agronomist who have been with the company for much longer, they've seen way more than I've seen till now, but not enough. I haven't seen enough. I mean, I'm definitely joining more conferences and going to
Yeah.
see more. And I think to your point, it's a very, very important way of learning.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, it leads to different types of vendors that you can find along the way that, can
Mhm.
provide you something for a better quality or a cheaper alternative or whatever the thing may be. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I like to wrap up these conversations, increase this sense of collaboration within CEA. So I always like to leave a little time at the end for any messages or any call outs or requests that you have in terms of collaboration or, from what you've seen or connected with people in the indoor ag space, maybe even introducing yourself to the indoor ag space through this conversation. But is there anything that comes to mind in the spirit of collaboration or any needs that you have to
Yeah,
connect?
absolutely. I think that anyone in the anywhere from the nutraceutical world or adjacent to it, in other words,
Okay.
suppliers of extracts to the Nutra world, okay,
Yeah.
or suppliers of extracts to the higher end cosmetics world,
Yeah.
or indoor or CEAs, vertical farming that want to expand their footprint to different types of, because our model will be our own production, but also licensing of our protocol and
Okay.
our technology.
Okay.
Though obviously that we're obviously in a fundraising stage. So anyone who would love to invest equity in a startup like ours,
Yeah.
we would love to talk to. And if you talk about, at the end of the day, we're going to be a spice, we're going to be an extract for the food supplement business and for the cosmetics. So anyone along that chain, vertical farming, again, Nutra Cosmetics world that is thinking about saffron, we're here and we'd love to
Okay.
hear from them. And I don't know if you have our website, but I'm happy.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Okay,
We have all
amazing.
the
And
yeah.
we're actually fundraising now. We're doing a small round in Israel of fundraising, and I can send you the link for that as well.
Okay.
And but at the end of the day, again, when you talk about the point you were making about strategic alliances, at the end of the day, it's really with a player that either has a offtake potential from me
Yep.
or likes the space and wants to invest in it, likes the
Okay.
R&D and wants to expand it to different types of things that he's doing right now and thinks he can bring something to our table.
Yep.
We're all ears.
Okay. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I know it's a little bit late there. I appreciate you making the time to jump on this conversation. And thank you for being the first. You're saying that the first opportunity you had to talk about saffron. I'm glad you came and shared your story on the show. It's very inspiring. And it's very interesting to see naturally, through this conversation, you can see how your background, all the experiences you had prepared you for this moment. And it's really exciting how all these are merging together. And you seem to be in the right place at the right time with the right team to do something that's going to be exciting. So it's going to be fun to watch. Please keep us updated on your progress.
Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you for your time. Thank you for spending the time with me. And thank you for asking me all these questions. I love it.
We'll make sure we have all the links in the show notes. It's saffron-tech.ag. Anywhere else you want to send people to connect with you?
Sure, you can connect with me through LinkedIn, Michael
Okay.
Oster, or Saffron Tech also has the LinkedIn.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone and everyone. And I look forward to progressing and keeping you posted.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.